It is Wednesday, the 28th of May, 2025, and I'm just going to go over what's going on internationally, some things I've shared or responded to on my social media accounts, because sometimes people enjoy that as well. And before I do, I haven't watched this yet, but this is from Viva Frei, and the title is very interesting to me. I'm not going to share it on this video, but I want to watch this about shocking foreign-born MP and foreign interference. Sorry, MPs as in plural, obviously, and foreign interference turned Canada into a U.S. national security threat. So something I have been tracking and sharing for years. And I would also say that these individuals are also a national security threat to Canadians, which is the bigger issue for me, right? So absolutely a threat to U.S. national security. I've admitted that. I've said that that's possibly going to be on the table. Finally being spoken out loud. Sorry, my dogs are distracted because we have people coming over to do some work. Anyways, so for my Instagram, so breaking, Blanchet slams Carney for inviting the king to open parliament. The bloc refuses to attend, calling him a foreign king, and that is disrespectful to Quebecers. Thoughts? So I put here that I 100% agree with Blanchet on this. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he's talking about regarding the pipelines, regarding energy, regarding these inter-provincial barriers that are still being put on the table. Also, Quebec is, the carbon tax initiated from Quebec, and they have different fees than people from Ontario and other provinces and territories have to pay. But again, look at the gas prices. Every time I travel to Quebec from Ontario, like I have to fill up before I get there because even though they're paying allegedly a little less for the carbon tax, whatever you want to call it, they're still paying at the pumps. And so, anyways, 100% agree with Blanchet on that. Oh, and COVID, how he handled COVID as well. Two thumbs down. Should be investigated for that. But anyway, I'm willing to forgive if he would openly admit and apologize for certain things because again, he does. I do agree with him on a lot of things, and I really liked how he handled the leadership debates as well. I do think that the bloc that they do take the majority of votes away from conservatives, and with Quebec being the second largest population in Canada, it's very significant. And so this is another reason why conservatives rarely have uh, anything more than a minority party, even if they do win issues like that. And so I'm wondering if there could be some kind of like stipulations where these bloc votes, there would still be the preservation of like Quebec identity and culture and traditions and language, um, but they would also like represent Quebec like from a conservative platform. I'm just interested in people's thoughts on that. So I'm saying that I'm from Quebec. I was born and raised there, and my family lineage is obviously my last name is Dussault, so it's like there's French from France, and but then also from Ireland and Scotland, and to lesser degrees like down the family line, like I'm sure Britain as well. But the point of this is it's not in my anyways. My family tree is France, Irish, Scottish, and Indigenous, and I'm saying tracking this back to like over 12, 14 generations, and we have fought wars, and we had to flee war from the Brits in these areas because they were raping and pillaging and torturing and murdering, taking our land, etc. And again, this should be common knowledge of our history, where even the French and the Scottish and the Irish, they actually formed alliances throughout many different eras to fight against the Brits to maintain or hold their land and establish sovereignty and their own religious freedoms, etc. And a lot of people had to flee or were forced out. And where did they go? They went to Canada and to the US and other areas. And so even here, we have fought wars in Canada and in the US, but now what we have established as the boundaries of Canada, where we've had the French and the Indigenous and Irish and Scottish form alliances to fight against the Brits and also fight against the Americans as well, again, to maintain or to establish some form of sovereignty. And so it's kind of a slap in the face when we keep on propping up the British monarchy when being born and raised in Quebec under that culture, this was always seen as a like almost like a slap in the face or like a negative thing, right? And it's a lot of people don't want to talk about that. They believe that we should have some blind obedience or allegiance to the British monarchy when even now when we're sharing that they've been involved in human trafficking, They've been involved in drug trafficking, arms trafficking, etc. And they're the biggest welfare recipients in the friggin' planet, respectfully speaking. But again, even pedophiles within their own ranks, where it's even been where it's been openly admitted now, and it's on the records and in the courts, etc. And yeah, and so to people that know this about that family, and it's just, again, it's just, it looks so abhorrent. It's just not, it's classless, it's tasteless, and I'm liking that Blanchard is actually calling that out, because again, I would expect nothing more from him, obviously coming from Quebec, being francophone, and standing up for that. So again, I do respect that. I know I'm long story longer, but that's my point to that. Actually, maybe you actually hear him. Maybe there's a clip. Yes, so Black Quebecois MPs will be reading the speech from their offices, absent on principle, in response to a move they say is disrespectful to a lot of Quebecers. So he says it more eloquently than myself, but he's a politician. I'm not. Yeah, this was interesting. The first Director General of the World Health Organization. To achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. Yeah. So this is what I was talking about regarding the Reform Act. The Liberal caucus has voted against adopting the Reform Act, which would have given Liberal MPs the power to oust leader Mark Carney, or any PM for that matter, if they deemed him unfit to lead the party. Liberal caucus chair James Maloney said Liberal MPs voted on May 25th not to adopt the act, but he declined to say anything more about the vote, insisting any discussions that happen in caucus meetings should remain private. I disagree with that. These are public servants, and this is important. And this is why we couldn't hold Justin Trudeau accountable before. And this was under his tenure that those changes were made where we couldn't. And so, if anything comes out where Mark Carney, can be connected to things like treason, um, financial crimes, etc., then how are we able to remove him from office, right? So I'm hoping the RCMP and others start investigating this guy further, and go from there. The Reform Act, which was introduced by Conservative MP Michael Chong on December 2013 and became law in June 2015, requires each parliamentary caucus to vote on the 4 key aspects of the legislation at their first meeting following a general election. So it goes on from there, so read the post. Okay, so this is graphic, and so I'm going to give you guys a trigger warning in advance. This is about female genital mutilation and what is still happening in other countries, and what has increased within Canada, but what is being hidden from the public. And the media is not reporting on this, but this is very much also being practiced in Canada now at higher rates, and especially higher rates since COVID. Like I was saying, when we started a surge of mass immigration, it wasn't properly controlled at all, and it was getting even worse. So if you look at the 2023 numbers, it is staggering. And I've shared that before as well, but look at the stats.
I was 7 years old. I was outside playing with my friends when I was picked up. My clothes were ripped off, and I was taken to a room where 3 women waited with blades, scissors, and all tools. These women were not doctors, nor were they medically trained, just tradition passed down through generations. They cut off my clitoris, the part of my body meant for womanhood. They then sliced away the inner labia and the outer labia. I remember I screamed in pain because during the procedure there's no anesthesia used, no comfort, only blood and loud silence. I remember crying and begging, but the woman told me to be quiet, to be brave, and to be proud, as that was part of our tradition. Once the cutting was done, my skin was stitched back together with thick thread or thorn, leaving only a tiny part of hole, barely enough for urine or blood to pass through. This process is called infibulation and is one of the most severe forms of FGM. After the procedure, I was laid in a dark room with my legs tightly tied together.
She's very brave.
So I was 7 years old. I was outside playing with my
That is still being practiced in many areas, and in Canada within the last 10 years, under this specific cabinet, still people in place. It went from being where these practices were prohibited in Canada. So when people enter Canada, they're also given pamphlets and data to look through, which shows them, again, like how to essentially integrate into Canadian society to varying degrees. And it gives like cultural pros and cons and things that are prohibited or frowned upon, etc. And female genital mutilation went from being prohibited, it went under like another level. I forget what it was, but it was like highly recommended against or whatever it was, and but not something that, again, it did, like this tolerance of cultural practices that are not compatible with our Canadian culture and ideologies and traditions and religious codes is just I don't understand why we're allowing this to be fully embraced within, not fully embraced, but to be practiced within our society still. And you're looking at where people are immigrating from, and it's anyways, it's an issue. And we now have military bases, police bases, legal frameworks within Canada, and it's separate from our legal system. So like even like not just China, but also like even with India and Pakistan and the Middle East, and Sharia law being practiced as well in mosques. And in other obviously buildings as well, and where they're going off of the coding and the legal frameworks of Sharia law and not Canadian law. And people have even admitted that they will lie under oath. They don't think that that's a sin or even a problem or an issue when they go in the Canadian courts, because they don't consider it to be relevant, if that makes any sense. I need another coffee, I think. But yeah, it's still happening.
Did you guys know that there were 3 presidents who were against the COVID vaccine? President of Haiti, the president of Tanzania, and the president of Burundi. Should we ask chatbot GPT whatever happened to those presidents? Yeah, I think we should.
President of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated in July 2021. This event has been investigated and received significant international attention.
Please tell me about the president of Burundi.
President of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, passed away in June 2020. His death was officially attributed to heart failure, although there was some speculation and controversy surrounding the circumstances. His passing marked the end of his 15-year rule over the country.
Can you please tell me about the death of the president of Tanzania?
President of Tanzania, John Magufuli, passed away in March 2021. His death was officially attributed to heart complications, but there was some speculation and discussion regarding the circumstances surrounding his passing. His death marked the end of his presidency in Tanzania.
Did you guys know that there were 3 presidents?
I mean, yeah, your death would result in the end of your leadership. Yeah, it's pretty final. Pretty final. This coming out of Ottawa. Police investigating death of 2 people in Barrhaven home. Ooh, yes, 9/11.
So on 9/11, the day of 9/11, there were 5 individuals that were on top of an apartment complex out in Jersey City, if I'm not mistaken, or Hoboken, one of these places right over the river. And they were there at about 8 o'clock in the morning, about an hour prior to the towers being hit. And what ended up happening was when the first tower got hit, they started celebrating and dancing, these 5 individuals. A woman is looking out to the towers with her binoculars, and she sees these 5 individuals dancing in front of a van. Well, that's weird. Why are these guys celebrating as the towers are on fire? And I'm not just talking about dancing. Like, these dudes were moonwalking. Like, they're doing some Michael Jackson type shit, right? They're going nuts, right? That's why she was able to see the commotion. So she calls up the police because she thinks that's kind of weird, and they look Middle Eastern. So the police catch up to them. She gives out the description of the van and the license plate. Police catch up to them and they stop them. When the officer approaches the car, guy gets out immediately. We are not Palestinian. Those are your enemies, right? It's like, what the hell? That's kind of a weird thing to say when you're getting stopped. So they check the guys out, and they're 5 Israeli citizens, right, with large sums of cash and plane tickets to leave the country the next day. And they're driving a van called Urban Moving Systems. It's like, this is weird. So they call the FBI. FBI bring these guys in. They run their names through their databases. They find out that 2 of them have ties to Israeli intelligence. Well, that's weird. These guys were there an hour before the towers hit. They're dancing and celebrating. And then they asked them, hey, did you guys have prior knowledge that this was going to happen? They said no, but they got polygraphed and they were lying. And then they end up holding those guys in jail for about 70 days, immigration custody. And then ended up getting deported, getting sent back to Israel. And they went on a talk show and they admitted that they were there to document the event, right? Which means they had foreknowledge that the tower was going to be hit. Then you find out that the buildings were purchased by a guy named Larry Silverstein, and he took out a very unique and unorthodox insurance policy that covered for terrorism. And then Building 7 went down in a perfect controlled demolition style, nice and even, and it never got hit by a plane. That was one of the small towers on the side of the World Trade Center. That went down randomly. And then witnesses on the ground said that they heard a bunch of bombs. Right? They heard bombs. Then it gets more interesting. And this is something that a lot of people don't know, and I'll share this with you guys. Another group of Israelis were caught out in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. And they were arrested as a part of a document benefit fraud conspiracy. On one end, you're like, oh, okay, these guys have fraud documents, whatever. Well, they find out that those guys were intelligence as well, and it gets crazier. One of them had a slip that shows that they were at the World Trade Center a month or 2 before 9/11. Okay? So on 9/11, the day of 9/11, there were 5.
I've done countless videos on 9/11. So I would highly recommend taking a look at them. I also shared Loose Change, but and again, so many others as well. This is from Mario.
Even though Mark Carney got elected, Trump is still talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. In fact, just 2 hours ago, he said, I told Canada, which very much wants to be a part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation. But it will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. Now, things are actually much worse than you may realize, and I'm going to show you. A recession is already being triggered by Donald Trump. In fact, his big, beautiful bill has something written in it that is absolutely brutal. And as you can see, this was just published a day ago, but I talked about it nearly 5 days ago. And I said, because Canada implemented the digital services tax targeting U.S. companies in Donald Trump's new big beautiful bill, he put a provision that allows them to increase the withholding tax that is paid by Canadians who own US stocks. That rate will go from 15% to 50%. And I know you may not think that it's a huge deal, but our CPP has nearly $1 trillion in total assets. In fact, they just made almost $60 billion, and they've had great returns for 2024 and 2025, but now more than half of all of their investments are in the US, and they're not planning on cutting the US exposure. The big beautiful bill, that's going to affect your pension, especially if Donald Trump removes the provision where they are exempt from the withholding tax. That's the current treaty that exists right now. The CPP doesn't even have to pay the 15%, but it might have to pay the 50%. So when he's saying he wants us to be the cherished 51st state, he's already setting up blocks economically in order to do that. He's playing chess. See, things are already starting to get ugly because Donald Trump's tariffs have decimated the Ontario auto sector.
It's not just the tariffs. The Ontario record-setting mortgage delinquency is enormously concerning. I was talking about this during COVID as well. They completely inflated the prices of homes, and the interest rates were through the friggin' roof. And depending on your mortgage contract requirements or obligations, you could do a 2-year fixed term, you could do a 3-year, you could do a 5-year. In some cases, you could do a 7. I wasn't able to. But if you bought just before the pandemic, so for example, my home, I got it in 2018. it was up for renewal in 2023, which was the worst friggin' time for interest rates, and I could have been locked in easily. And it almost doubled my mortgage, by the way, poof, just out of nowhere. And a lot of other things as well were increased. But again, and so and I was calling out people within the real estate industry as well that were also like part of this, and the destruction companies like at the like this freaking monopoly, and people within government that were pushing this. But it and I said this is going to fail. This is absolutely going to fail, and it is. And so now I did in 2023 I did a closed year fixed term again, because again it was still unpredictable. And so now it's up for renewal again. And so I'm in a period where I'm waiting until the 4th of June, for example, to see if like the interest rates are going to, they're either going to stay the same. They may lower. I don't know, but that will significantly not significantly, but it'll still lower my mortgage rates when I resign. And so luckily I knew that this is possibly going to be something that we were going to be, uh, not saved from, because again it's still a friggin' mess, but like I knew that it's gonna, like within like at least a 2-year period, like the interest rates were going to be lower than at least it was then, because I knew it was like at the friggin' peak, because they were exploding the pandemic. And but a lot of people put in for a 5-year close fixed term throughout that period, so these are coming up for renewal. And so if you were even buying in the 2022 time frame, the interest rates were still significantly lower than 2023. And so within the next couple of years, I was saying that when people can't afford this, and people are defaulting on their mortgages because their mortgages almost doubled, or at least in some cases maybe like a third, but that's still significant. And it wasn't like they were making more money. It wasn't like this money would have had to magically come out of thin air, and then put the carbon tax on that as well. And especially if you're living in more rural areas or farms, and that shut down a lot of them as well, because they couldn't afford the carbon tax scam and the interest rates. And I can go on tangents on that, but again, this has nothing to do with Trump and the tariffs, and everything to do with what we're locked into before Trump even got inaugurated. So again, this is nonsensical to me. And even with our house sales for first time homeowners, it's low. It's very low right now. So it's going to have to do something in order to reinvigorate like that certain demographic. And so they might have to lower the price of homes that they overinflated during that period, the 2020 to 2023, almost 2024 timeframe. And so boomers that voted for Carney, they're not understanding that what they think their house might be valued at now, if they're still like holding on to it and just like getting people to rent from you and stuff like that and haven't sold. But like you're looking at like the price value being significantly lower than what you thought it was in 2023 in your appraisals, or 2024 for that. Oh, I need to get better internet. What's going on with my hair? What is going on? I'm just going to see actually before I load. I'm going to go into my Instagram. No, X. I had that wrong. Can you see this? No, you cannot. Even though I have it in presentation mode. There we are. Okay. The arrival of King Charles is a powerful and symbolic reminder of Canada's sovereignty. This was from the Globe and Mail. And this was from Concerned Canadian, his comment on that. So this is most likely the most ludicrous and overtly biased headlines that I have read in a long time, and I don't disagree with him. This was from Tom Marazzo. I find his post to be quite interesting. So this was inspired by today's events and a post by Tom Quiggin. Today I heard Canada's charter referred to as a list of constitutional privileges. That phrase should terrify every citizen in this country, because a privilege is not a right. A privilege can be revoked. A right cannot. Let's stop pretending this is just a semantic slip-up. It's not. It's the intentional erosion of legal and moral clarity in the minds of the public. It's psychological warfare. A privilege is something granted to you by authority, earned, conditional, and temporary. A right is something inherent, permanent, and invoidable, I think he meant to say. Governments around the world, and Canada is no exception, are starting to shift the public's understanding of freedom. No longer speak of inalienable rights. They speak of granted privileges, and too many citizens are letting them get away with it. The state is a nation that still pretends to honor its charter or constitution, but no longer treats those rights as foundational. Instead, it reclassifies them as privileges, granted and revoked by government based on your obedience and alignment with state-approved opinions. It still has elections, it still has courts, it still has the appearance of democratic process, but none of it functions as intended. It's all managed through media, bureaucracy, and lawfare, and supranationalist organizations that go to Bilderberg, and Bohemian Grove, and Davos, and WEF. This isn't just backsliding, this is a all right. I'm going to end this soon, even though I still want to go through more posts. I don't think my internet's going to cooperate too much. I don't know where we left off. Okay, so now we freeze bank accounts without trial. We criminalize protest. We police speech. We rewrite history and redefine justice in real time. We call coercion consent. We call obedience unity. And now we call rights privileges. This is the language of controlled decline. The nation is not evolving, it is de-developing. We're not the developed world anymore, not in any meaningful sense. We are a neo-extractive state where the government serves its own interests by draining the citizenry. A post-competent nation where legacy institutions still exist but no longer perform. A managed democracy where choices are offered but none that matter. A post-right state where your charter is still printed on paper but no longer engraved in law. It's not that the West is collapsing into chaos. It's that we are being reorganized into something else. And if you don't start defending the language of freedom, if you let them replace rights with privileges, then you've already accepted your role as a subject, not a citizen. This isn't a slope we're slipping down. We've already fallen halfway off the cliff. The only question is, will we climb back up or just get comfortable with the view on the way down? And there are people that are, obviously, they're giving compelling rebuttals to this. And so let me see if I can just... The Canadian Charter is designed and ordered to be easily revoked by the government. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrated whatever they want if they are voted in. And anyways, there's more interesting things from here as well. But okay, so from Philip Lawrence, and there it is. Mark Carney has no intention to pass legislation removing interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day, despite stating over and over again that the campaign trail despite stating over and over again on the campaign trail that this was his goal. Canadians were promised change, but this is straight from the old Liberal playbook. So this was from Mackenzie Gray. When I asked the PMO about this, they confirmed their intention is only to introduce, not pass trade legislation by Canada Day. And they noted that the LPC platform only promised to bring forward legislation by July 1st. All right, there's more here. So this is Sarah Levine. She wasn't crying when she was severely punishing January 6ers for misdemeanors. Her crocodile tears are music to my ears.
To work. I walked to the metro station.
See, like these social justice warriors, these lunatics, these radicals that absolutely lied about what happened on January 6, 2021. And I have so much footage about what happened on that day, before and after. So please take a look at those videos regarding January 6th. Crisis actors, role players, the plants. I give names, I all of that. Anyway, people like her lied and over embellished so much where people were still in jail that were innocent. And this is disgusting because she's now she's upset and crying and like devastated because she lost her job, and rightfully so, because she's an incompetent user. Anyway.
After 3 weeks of training and getting prepared for the next week, that Friday I left work. I walked to the metro station. I got on the train and I pulled out my phone and I saw a litigation hold that had been put on it. And attached to that was a memo that gave Mr. Martin permission to fire probationary employees from the capital section that were moved to other places in the office.
Sorry.
The memo referenced people but didn't have a list of names attached. But the information provided was confusing. I knew I was probably on the list, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. I headed back to the office so I could figure out what was happening. I was met by my colleagues who shared their confusion and a heartbreak over this.
People were in jail, lady. No one cares. You need jail. People care about that. You need jail. So this was from Chris Erickson. Do you support Canada separating completely from the monarchy and reforming our systems institutions? I said yes. From Real Talk Politics, CBC Canada's state-funded media just got YouTube to terminate my channel, not for breaking rules, but for having the wrong political views. CBC couldn't compete with the content, so they tried to erase it. This is censorship in Canada. So Real Talk Politics had a lot of views, and apparently like a lot more than a lot of CBC news broadcasters, or whatever you want to call it, and affiliates. And so they personally reached out to YouTube to just completely just remove this channel. Absolutely disgusting. These people need to be defunded. And prison time for some. Anyway, I will see if my Instagram will pop back up. I'll reload. It's always risky. Okay. All right, no. Okay, I'm over that. Leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And if you're interested in my other videos, I have a lot on so many different topics, so Take a look.